There's no subtle way to like and then have that sound go off.
At least everyone's warned.
That's true. That's true. Okay. Well, as everyone's joining, I just want to briefly introduce myself. My name is Sarah Holloway, and I am the Director of Alumni Relations for the College of Architecture and Design. And so we're so happy to be here to connect you with some of our alumni, to offer you feedback for the upcoming career fair, both ours, and I know that there's a couple others coming up. So we're happy to help you in any way we can to get prepared and send you out into the workforce ready to go. So we have Lauren Herman here, who is your career counselor if you are a current student of ours. So hopefully you've interacted with her. She's going to give you a presentation to start off for the first about 20 minutes or so. So we'll ask her to introduce herself here in just a second. But before we get into that, I'm going to ask if you are an alumni volunteer who is here, if you'll just take a second to maybe introduce yourself, say where you are and what your current role is. And then you're always welcome, as Lauren presents, just to kind of share from personal experience, you know, either as an interviewee or an interviewer during her presentation as well. And then at the end, last 30-40 minutes, we'll send you into breakout rooms, and then you will get kind of that feedback from alumni. If you have a resume that you want to show, or portfolio, things like that, you're welcome to show and get feedback from them. So I'll go ahead and turn it over, and we'll start off with Jessica. Do you mind just kind of unmuting and introducing yourself? And then, sorry, one last thing is you're always welcome to use the chat feature. If you have a question, or if throughout Lauren's presentation you have a question, we might just ask that you use the the raise hand function or something like that's here in Zoom, right? Or is that Teams?
No, it is.
But or you can always drop it in the chat, either way. So I will turn it over to Jessica here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jess Deaver, and I'm a registered architect in Texas. I'm an alumni from the Masters of Architecture program at the University of Houston. I graduated in 2016, and I now work with my father in our firm at Nick Deaver Architect, which is split between Austin and Houston.
Good, thank you. Linda?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Linda Camacho. I work at Kirksey Architecture, been in the field for 22 years. I am a senior project coordinator at Kirksey and a junior project manager.
Thank you. Crystal? Oh, Crystal, it looks like you're muted.
I'm Crystal Granger. I work for Virgil Gay and Associates as a senior project manager. I graduated from the University of Houston in 1991 and in 2004. I'm also the current secretary for the Houston chapter of the NOMA organization. And I'm looking forward to meeting with the students today. We have a career fair that will be taking place tomorrow of our own.
Great. All right, Andrew.
Hey, y'all. My name is Andrew Gressett. I am a landscape designer and urban planner at SWA Group. I graduated from U of H with a bachelor's degree in 2016, and excited to be here.
Thanks. Candace. Oh, Candace, for some reason, I'm not picking up your audio.
How about this? Sorry.
Now we can hear you.
Technical difficulties. I'm Candace Tape, and I work at a W Partnership here in Houston, the Galleria area, and I work as a designer, but also a director of professional development within our firm. Happy and excited to talk with you guys today.
Great, thank you. Eric.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. My name's Eric Hudson. I'm one of the partners at Method Architecture. We've been around since 2016. Graduated from U of H master's program in 2008. Been working since the early 2000s. My focus at Method is on our design, technology, and quality control processes. So excited to be here and give my feedback.
Thanks. Matt.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew Mitchell. I graduated December of 2006. I'm a registered architect. I have my own practice. We specialize in residential and like boutique commercial. I'm also the president of the alumni board currently. And just want to reiterate how happy I am to see everyone here and look forward to meeting some of you. And I'm actually done some interviewing this past week. So there's a few highlights that I'd like to point out real quick, Lauren. Something that stood out to me as we've been doing this in the resumes, I think it's really important to get in the extracurriculars, even if you think it's minor and meaningless. A lot of that can kind of display a little personality. And so anyway, I'm sure you'll speak to that, but just wanted to kind of mention that up front. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And last but not least, Shannon.
All right, guys, having technical issues too. My background is flipped too, but I'm Shannon. I am the Senior Vice President of Marketing for Midway. So they're a commercial investor and developer throughout Texas. And I am also serving as on the board for the architecture alumni group as well. I'm serving as the student engagement chair. So we're really excited that this opportunity is happening. We've been planning for this for several months, actually, Lauren and Sarah and I. So thank you for joining, and we hope that you really get some value out of it. Looking forward to connecting with many of y'all. So thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much for being here, everyone. We're excited to get your feedback. And with that, we'll turn it over to Lauren.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for coordinating this event and making this happen. And I do want to, again, thank all of our alum for being here. So students, if you are hearing those introductions, there's a whole range of experience, kind of types of firms, specialties, things like that. And so I do hope you get a lot of chances to connect with our awesome alum who are here to support you and help you out at Career Fair, not just the one for the college, but especially if you're attending NOMA's Career Fair tomorrow. I want you to feel really prepared and really feel confident in what to put on your resume and how to list things on your resume, because a resume is a really strategic document. So we want you to know what some of those strategies are. Before I jump into, I'm gonna have some quick slides. I am gonna try to keep myself to 20 minutes today, but I did wanna point out that with so many different areas within design, I hear a lot of people want different things. So like I've talked to 2 people at the same firm, and each person is looking for something just a little bit different on their resume, or might have a little bit of different advice. So as I go, please alum, if there's something that you look for that you think, look at in a different way, please feel free to share, because I do think it's helpful for students to hear those multiple perspectives. So I just want to kind of put that out there up front. So with that, I am going to share just a few slides. Let me get my screen up. And I should introduce myself. So Sarah mentioned it earlier, but my name is Lauren Herman, and I'm the career counselor for the College of Architecture and Design. There's a lot of ways that I can support you, whether it's through a one-on-one appointment, putting on presentations like this, really any kind of career question you have, I'm happy to help with. I want you to know that you've got services available. So if you need anything, please let me know. And with that, I will jump on in. So let me get this pulled up. All right, so I think there might be a little delay, maybe. There we go. And if I freeze for whatever reason, please unmute or add to the chat to let me know. Technical difficulties do happen these days. So just to jump in, I'm going to talk about some general tips because again, you'll have time at the end for an individual review. So I'm going to go over kind of general tips when you're thinking about creating or updating your resume. I'm going to go over some strategies for how to format experience and different kinds of things that you would put on your resume. Again, go over some general guides in terms of both content and formatting, just some considerations. And then we're going to go into a little bit of some portfolio tips. Again, I'm going to kind of keep it general and then give you some more resources so that if after today you're wanting some more support on your resume or portfolio, you know how to get that support. And then of course, we'll give you a chance to connect with our awesome alum at the end today. So some general resume tips. As a current student, it's recommended that your resume be one page and skimmable. Now, the higher up you go in your career, the more time is spent reading your resume because the position that you're being hired for is going to be a bigger investment for the company usually. But typically for entry-level jobs, a resume may only be read for 5 to 7 seconds and a portfolio for even as little as a minute. So you want to make sure that your resume is really presentable and it's easy on the eyes. You also want to put things in reverse chronological order. So within every single section, you want whatever is most recent or current to go first, and then list backwards within each section. And we'll go more into what kind of sections you might have on your resume. So fonts. As a designer, I can understand you might want something a little more pretty than Times New Roman. That's fine. Just make sure it's easy to read. So nothing like Comic Sans, Curls MT. I personally am not a fan of the typewriter. I find it takes up a lot of space on your page. And again, it's not very easy on the eyes, but just be mindful of a font that fits your style, but is also still really legible. Be mindful of colors. So especially if you have a lot of colors in your portfolio and you want to have some colors that kind of mimic your style in the resume, just be mindful that it's not so colorful that it's distracting from content, because at the end of the day, the content on the resume, as well as what you put in your portfolio, is going to help you get that interview, not necessarily how beautiful your resume is. That kind of leads me also into graphs and charts. So a lot of people like to keep their resume a little more visually interesting by having icons or like kind of scales that show, for example, like 4 out of 5 stars on Revit or something like that. Just be mindful that, I'm going to talk more about this in a second, but there's something called applicant tracking systems. And if you are applying to a job online that is using these ATS systems, it can't read those. So just be mindful of maybe even having 2 different versions of your resume, one that maybe is more visually interesting to give in person, and one that maybe looks a little more traditional to submit online, because I would hate for you to not get through an application because, you know, the robots couldn't read your resume. And then templates, I don't believe in templates just because templates are like a one-size-fits-all, and that's not how resumes are. Resumes are dynamic, they change, they're strategic based on where you are in your career and what you're going for. So I don't recommend using templates. I recommend you kind of create your own design. Start with a blank Word document, or if you're comfortable using things like more design-related software, you can definitely do that too. So I know I just covered a lot of general tips. So I do want to pause for a second in case there's anything anyone wants to chime in. You can just unmute yourself.
Well, this is probably not relevant for a few years for the new fresh graduates, but I will say that once you have, I think, at least 3 years of experience in the field of architecture, you also don't need to put the year you graduated. It actually dates you and can detract from your skill set. So if you're a highly skilled practitioner of whatever it is that you are specializing in, you definitely don't want to say, oh, and I graduated 2 years ago, because you may have 5 years of experience, even though you only just graduated. So just be mindful of when you need to actually put your graduation date.
Thank you, Jess. That's helpful. I usually give a 10-year rule, so that's helpful to hear that 3 years works.
Lauren, the only other thing I would add is on the color and designs. I mean, as design majors, we all want to design everything, right? I mean, so it is important how it looks, but over designing is definitely not good. Like you want to make sure it's clean, it has the content that you're trying to get across. The look is important. We're all designers. We all will pay attention to that, but putting too much on there is detrimental, I think.
And proofreading it, making sure there's no misspellings as well.
Really good point. And that's something I see. Thank you, Linda. That's something I see a lot because especially if you're using, like let's say you're using, I don't know, like InDesign or some other kind of tool that for your resume, a lot of times students don't use the spell check, and that is a common thing that I see. Really good point.
Lauren, I would also recommend that they think about the font size, 10 or 11, depending on the actual font. Given that people are spending more time on the computer, they're stressing their eyes out. And when you're of a certain age, reviewing that much material, that can be difficult. So in keeping with your easy on the eyes and quick to read, they need to be mindful of the font size, as well as the hierarchy from that point for their headings. I noticed in some resumes, they go very big on the headings, and they're not able to get enough information, critical information on the resume.
Great points. Thank you, Crystal. I like to say definitely don't go below 10.5 because at that point you're going to give someone a headache and no one wants to hire you if you're giving them a headache. Anybody else? Awesome. Okay, I'm going to get into just a few more considerations, I'll say. Let's see, we'll go to the next slide. There we go. Okay. So I have a more graphically, visually interesting resume here just as an example, because in a minute, I'm going to show you a more traditional style resume. And a lot of times people see it and say, oh no. So I want to show you, these are okay too. I just want you to be really mindful of how you're showing your resume, okay? So I mentioned earlier, if you're using things like icons and logos, they can look really nice, but just be mindful of how you're using it. So if you're applying to, let's say Kirksey, maybe Linda could speak to this. If you're applying to Kirksey and it's in their online application system, there's definitely going to be some applicant tracking system that's going to be reviewing your resume and scanning for certain keywords. And if the resume isn't picking up certain things, it's not going to pass your resume along to a recruiter or hiring manager. So just be mindful of how you're using your resume and how you share it, okay? I don't believe that, at least at entry level, that you need a profile or a summary. I think kind of like what Jess was saying earlier, once you've got more experience, you've got 3-5+ years of experience, then it's great to add a summary because there's a little bit more that you have to summarize about your career and where you're going. But I would say for most students who are looking for internships or entry-level jobs, you may not need it at this point. If you do decide to use columns, or really for any format you choose, just be mindful that we read top to bottom and left to right. So whatever is going to be most relevant, you want towards the top or towards the left, and things that are kind of like bonus can be towards the bottom and towards the right. So again, especially if your resume is only being reviewed for 5 seconds, you want to make sure that what you really want them to see is at the top and it pops. So there's actually a lot of research that shows that the most spent time on the page visually is the top third of the resume. So just make sure that what you really want to get across is in that top third, okay? Related to that, if you're a current student and you are again looking for like an internship, your education is pretty important right now. So I do recommend having your education at the top for now. Once you get more experience under your belt, the education, kind of like Jess was saying also on this, isn't as relevant. So education can go down. So think about, again, we want really relevant stuff at the top. Things that are bonus can kind of start to move towards the bottom of the resume. And a lot of times you'll see this in templates where education's at the bottom. And that's the reason why. It's assuming there's already several years of experience to showcase instead. Do try to keep some kind of similar style to your resume or portfolio. So you want to make sure that when someone gets your document, they can tell this is the same designer. It's not looking like 2 complete different submissions or styles. Another tip is if you are looking for, again, an internship and you haven't gotten firm experience yet, I find a way to make your resume feel a little bit more design focused is to add a studio project. So you could have a section for projects in your resume, and that's a way just to show more of your demonstration of what you're learning in the classroom. So that's an optional section. Again, I'll show you in a minute how that could look, but that's another strategy for kind of getting your foot in the door. And then no matter what, keep your information that you list relevant. So like, let's say you've only had one job, but you still want to include it. And your job was being a cashier at McDonald's. That's awesome. Focus on the things that you did when you were a cashier at McDonald's that are going to be most relevant to what you want to do in the future. So if you clean tables or bust, it's great that you have that experience, but my guess is you don't want to go do that at a firm, right? So maybe the things you want to focus on instead are some of your communication skills you use, or being really detail oriented and organized. And those are going to be the pieces of your past experience, even if it's not firm experience, that you want to highlight on your resume. Okay. And so before I jump into kind of going through a sample, I do want to kind of pause again in case there's any questions or other advice or comments folks want to share. Look, I'm going really fast. I'm like out of breath because I'm talking so fast. So let me know also if anyone has questions about anything.
Well, looking at this particular resume with the skills and the graph, as you were speaking to before, I definitely find that to be not very useful at all, because let's pick out Photoshop there. Photoshop to me may be, in the skills associated with it, may be very different to somebody who's a photographer, for example. And so like, what does that bar mean? Like what's like, it's all subjective, right? So I think just indicating things that you have experience in CAD, Photoshop, anything like that is probably the most relevant, just to list it out.
Thanks for that, Matthew.
Mm-hmm. Lauren, I would add to Matthew's point that they should also indicate their proficiency in the software, so they can separate it by proficiency versus working knowledge.
Great point. So just have next to Photoshop, for example, basic or proficient or
right,
mm-hmm.
or intermediate. Yes.
Thanks, Crystal.
Lauren, you mentioned not to have a cover sheet, like a cover page. I just find it that it's your first impression, and it's like when you meet someone for the first time, or you walk into a space and you say good morning or good afternoon. That's greeting the person that's reviewing it for the first time. They might not review it, but at least they know you were, what's the word? I'm forgetting the word, sorry. Greeting them in the process before they start reviewing the resume.
Sure, actually, thank you. Yeah, I actually hadn't gotten to like a cover letter or something like that, but that is a great idea, and that would just be something separate to have with it. But yeah, and I think especially if you're applying online, like a cover letter is really nice to have.
I agree, and we also appreciate when you've done a little bit of research about the firm that you're applying to, and so tying yourself to that and saying like, oh, if say we work at a multifamily architecture firm, it's like, oh, I've always loved multifamily, or I've enjoyed this project that you guys have done. It really brings that bit of personality and a little bit more connection.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I would follow up on that you should always research every job you're going to apply to. So you should know every project that they've done, what their field of expertise is, and what department. Like if you're going to work at or apply for Gensler or somewhere, you should know that maybe they don't do certain types of projects, so that if that's your main interest, they're going to immediately send your resume to the side, because maybe they know that they're not a good fit for you. So you should research. Another thing I was going to bring up, someone in the chat, I think, had said that about encouraging listing leadership roles and things like that. That is a great idea. Also, you probably don't need to do things like list your GPA and things like that. Those are not helpful. Maybe someone else can chime in as well if that's helpful for bigger firms, but for a small firm, we don't it doesn't matter to us at all what your grades are. So knowing that you were like the head of you got some extra award for your grades won't help us to define whether or not you'll be a good fit for us.
It's a really great point. Anybody else? Great. These are really helpful considerations. What I'll do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pull up our resume sample for the college. And I'm just going to kind of go through top to bottom some things you can include, like leadership experience, things like that. So again, please feel free to chime in as I go. I just thought it would be more helpful to kind of go through a visual so people can see how they might list some of these things on their resume. So with that, I will reshare. All right, so here we have, is everyone able to see my screen, Sally Sample? Okay, so here we have Sally Sample. And some things to note is, again, we're gonna list whatever is most relevant that we really wanna highlight at the top, and then kind of work our way down to kind of like bonus things is a way to think about it. So the top, you would definitely wanna have your name nice and big, city, state, you don't need to have your street address, but definitely have a phone number that you check where the mailbox is not full, and a professional email that preferably has your name in it. You don't have to use your U of H email, but just make sure it is a professional email address. I've worked with students who had like hotbabe405 at AOL, and just keep in mind, this is your first impression and they might not be looking to hire hotbabe405 at this time. So just keep that in mind, okay? Make sure again, you got working voicemail, things like that. If you have an online version of your portfolio or a website, that's something that you could also add here. Also, for those of you who have LinkedIn profiles, which at some point I encourage all of you to have, that's also another link you could have at the top of your resume too. I mentioned this earlier, but as a current student, again, especially if you're looking for like a part-time job or internship, I recommend having education at the top. You want to make sure you list the right degree. So if you are an architecture student, you're getting a Bachelor of Architecture. Just make sure you know what kind of degree you're getting to list here. Again, also put the month and year you plan to graduate. Like we talked about earlier, as you get further along in your career, that those dates become less important. But right now, people might want to know when you're graduating. If you have a minor, you can list it. Again, GPA is optional. I say like if you've got it above a 3.0, kind of like if you got it, flaunt it. If you don't worry about it. But like you heard earlier, people are really looking more for your experience and interest as a designer. Some optional things you could include on your resume could be study abroad. That's a really cool thing to share. You would just put the name of your study abroad program and when you did it, and then a couple of bullet points describing some of the things you did maybe during that project or that you learned about during that time. We talked about projects earlier. So if there's a project you did in a studio you want to highlight, especially again, if you're trying to get your foot in the door and just have more design related things on your resume, you could list a project, and that could be just coming up with the name of the project, what studio, and then the months and years you worked on it, and a couple of bullet points describing the scope of what you did. One thing to note with all of your bullet points, whether you're describing your study abroad, projects, experience, you don't want it to be so lengthy that it looks like a paragraph, because we know that when people see paragraphs, really anything more than 2 lines, they tend to be less likely to read it. So you want to keep it relatively brief, but still have enough detail that someone can get in a sense of what you did and why it mattered. So things like adding numbers where you can in terms of size of the site or number of people on your team or things like that can be really helpful. And you also want to start every bullet point with a strong action verb. Like, for example, design, documented, coordinated, things like that. Now, some people don't stylistically like bullet points. That's okay if that's you. It doesn't have to be like a true bullet point. You just want to make sure that it's listed in a way that's really skimmable and again, action oriented and has numbers and kind of is focused on the kind of key highlights of what you did. Anything anyone else want to add about what I've talked about so far?
Lauren, we have a question in the chat, which I think is really interesting from Javier on the topic of links. If we don't have a portfolio but use Instagram to post our projects, should we include a link to that as well? I see Jessica chimed in there.
Yeah, thanks, Javier. I will actually put that out to the alum. That's not something I've kind of heard of before. Alum, what are your thoughts?
Jessica, I think you got a quick answer to it, but I mean, I think you need to be prepared to show your work if asked. So if that's via Instagram or portfolio or whatever that is, have some sort of form of your work prepared if it's requested. I would second Jessica's comment in the chat though. If it's a personal social media account, also be aware that anything else on there will be reviewed by that potential hiring agent and, for better or worse, help or hurt. So just be cognizant of what everything's on there. It's all public once you send it over.
Yeah, I would say definitely scrub your social media before you do applications if you're going to use your social media at all. I know a lot of young people have Finstas. Those are the fake Instagrams. So just switch all that over to your fake Instagram and start a new one that's going to be fresh and just professional with your name. Because, not to tell you to be not truthful, but the fact that, you're a brand and social media is about branding. And so if you're going to brand yourself, you need to be aware that every single thing you do, if you went to the lake last weekend, you are branded as a person that goes to the lake. So you just need to make sure that everything you're doing represents that brand in the best possible light.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would second all of this. I think it was, you have a second Instagram entirely. This has nothing to do with your personal use, and this is just entirely one-off. It's built as a portfolio Instagram. It's built as a company, if you will, Instagram, and it's branded as such. But it has no ties to, personal use. And by all means, I think it's a great way to kind of show kind of your touch and your way of utilizing social media to kind of promote your brand. And as long as you use it in that way and don't kind of conflict the two, then I think it's a great way.
I'd like to mention something too. I think our firm in particular would have no issue with reviewing through social media, but I like to call out just a firm that I worked for in the past. They're Curtis and Wyndham, a very, very high-end skilled classical firm. And they do have social media presence, but I think there's going to be some firms out there that still operate under a formality. And I don't know, I might encourage to also have the social media presence, but maybe have that PDF or that portfolio in the background, because I don't know if all firms would. You might limit yourself if that's your only avenue for showing what you're capable of, et cetera.
I agree, and our firm isn't that large, so we actually do save the resumes and portfolios together in a folder on our server somewhere where we can all see it. So sometimes that's harder because it's an extra link that you have to add in there. But if you have it in a quick PDF, it's easier to kind of reference, and we can always click it through your resume as an addition.
Yeah, I would agree with all of this, and I would definitely look at Instagram more as supplementary information and not as in lieu of a portfolio or anything like that.
These are great perspectives. Thank you, Javier, for the question, and thank you all for your input. It's a creative way to list your work for sure. I noticed the time, and I want to make sure everyone has time for the one-on-ones too, to go even deeper. So I'm just gonna kind of briefly go through some other things you might include on your resume. And I do recommend kind of going in this order too, especially if you're a current student. So again, education at the top. If you wanted to list anything education related, they usually kind of go together. So having some, especially if you have academic projects, it could go underneath that. And then from there into your experience. Again, experience could be being a cashier at McDonald's. Just make sure you focus on the things that are most related to what you'll be doing in the future. So again, knowing where you're applying, what the company does, all of those things are really going to inform what kind of parts of your past experience you choose to highlight. Okay. Other things you would want to include would be a skill section. In a skill section, we're going to keep it to just technical skills. This would be like languages and softwares that you're familiar with. I also recommend listing the most in-demand skills first. So right now Revit is pretty in demand. So I usually recommend if you've got exposure to Revit, list that first. And then as Crystal mentioned earlier, you can also add the level of proficiency next to you. You can even just add it in parentheses. So if it's Grasshopper, basic, or intermediate, you would just put that next to it as one way. You could also organize your skills by level of proficiency. So if you wanted to have basic skills, and then you could write the software out related to that, or intermediate skills and relate softwares that you feel more intermediate in. That's just an example, but we do want to keep it to technical skills. What I mean by that is we would not include things like great communicator, because there's not a way to really test that. So if you have skills that like communication skills or teamwork skills or organization skills, things like that, that you want to highlight on your resume, it's more powerful if in your bullet points, in your experience, you talk about when you had great communication skills, or you talk about when you demonstrated being really organized. That's going to speak a lot more to your skills than just listing them. Okay. Other things you can include would be honors or awards. So if you're on Dean's List, and again, also if you've been a part of competitions or things like that, you could list that here too. And then of course, leadership or any organizations you're a part of. So you've heard this a couple of times. People really want to know what you did outside of the classroom and outside of your all-consuming studios. So include, what was your role, the name of the organization, and the start year and end year that you've been in that organization. You don't have to have like a full description about what you did. Especially you may not have room on your resume for that, but definitely make sure you're listing things there. I think it's also a really cool way to connect with other people that you're interviewing with, because if you were in, let's say, AIAS, and the person reading your resume is an alum and is like, oh, I was in AIS too, that's a really neat thing that you already have in common. So it is important to list those kinds of things. Anything that I have missed that y'all want to add in?
One more question in the chat here. By honors, can we list memberships of things like Rotary clubs or the Houston Rodeo, etc.?
I would consider that to be more of like an activity. So I have this section called leadership. You could fill that in with any section you want. You could call that, you could have community service, you could have extracurriculars, you could have memberships and affiliations. So I would say those are great things to include, but you might want to come up with a different section header for it. They're great things to include for sure.
I would say they would be really good for interviews too. So those might be things that you save for an interview type discussion, just because you really want to curate the resume to be tight, to be a story that's really clear. And so sometimes, Houston Rodeo may be something great to add if, especially you're applying to a firm that does work with the rodeo. And so there are things that you really need to consider, maybe that space that you're using to list those, the Houston Rodeo could be better used to add another line about something else that's more design related, even if it's not specifically about school or anything like that.
Good point. Other thoughts before we head back to any?
I'd like to ask a quick question. I think that, like for me, I've never had a corporate experience or everything's been like real small firm oriented. And when I look at a resume, the things that I kind of overlook a lot of what was happening in school, unless if it was extracurricular, like Rotary Club and Houston Rodeo and involvement really jumps out at me, because I'm looking for somebody who can wear many hats, get in front of clients, knows how to talk to the world, etc. But I also don't want to like steer the message in a wrong way. When you are applying to big corporate firms and things like that, are the corporate firms looking for that kind of stuff too, or are they looking at other points on the resume? I just want to be clear, just to not send the wrong signal too, as well.
think some of them do. I know Kirksey does. It's really important that the employees are active in the community because you're networking at the same time. And that's how the word of the firm gets around. And at the end of the day, also get projects. So it's, for us, it is important.
Cool.
And especially now, I know in the situation that we are in COVID, it's really important that you can wear different hats. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself into something. So the people that are currently there can do multiple things. And that's really important that you learn to do all different things as you're growing in your profession and not pigeonhole yourself into something. Unless you really love that. I know it does happen, but just know that if you're in the corporate world, you do need to wear different hats. You're more valuable that way.
Thanks for the perspective, Matthew and Linda. That's where I hear mixed things. That's one of the things I hear mixed things on is extracurriculars. And then I didn't mention interest because I tend to find that having a section for extracurriculars is a better way to show more of your personality than just an interest is, especially if you only have so much room on a page. That's something in particular where I hear mixed things, where some people really want to get a better sense of the individual and some people are like, I'm just looking for the design related experience. So I definitely hear mixed things about that one.
Right. And when they interview you, it's also the chemistry counts a lot. So you might have a wonderful resume, but if you don't click with the person that's interviewing you, that's where you also want to find out beforehand who's going to interview you. If you know someone within the firm, you can ask and get to know and prepare yourself. It varies. Sorry, Matthew, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just agreeing. I was nodding,
Oh.
Yeah, I would say when we look at resumes and interviews, we're a big part for us is finding people that fit our firm and what we're looking for, because we're a little bit different than the next firm, et cetera, and that firm's a little bit different than the next firm. And so extracurriculars are not, I mean, it's all about the message. Like it's about, for us, trying to find out if that personality is a good personality fit. And so for sometimes the extracurriculars matter, sometimes they don't. It also matters on the position. If you're going for a entry-level designer position, sometimes those are good, sometimes they're not. So you kind of weigh like where am I applying at and what is important and what am I trying to show by including these. If I'm going to try to show leadership skills, then it's good to include. If I'm trying to show something that may or may not apply to a design position, then it may or may not be applicable. So I think just evaluating what you're writing down and it's if it's applicable to this scenario is kind of a good light to look at then.
Mm-hmm. Great. With that, I want to make sure that students have more time to hear your advice. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Sarah start breakout rooms. Before I do that, I do want to let students know, this is a reminder, I'm your career counselor. So if after today you get some great feedback, you make edits and you want another review, one, you can always see if the alum you're talking to are open to staying connected. But two, I want to make sure you know how to reach me. So if you're attending today and you got the link, you have my email. So please email me and I'm always happy to review resumes or documents that way. You can also always schedule an appointment with me in Cougar Pathway. So with that, I will kind of close out my portion. So thank you all for being here and thanks alum for all your advice.
Okay, everyone, I have breakout rooms pre-assigned here. So it looks like we'll be having one alumni to about 3, maybe 4 students here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open these rooms here and give you a chance. Students, if there's someone who you like really connected to something they said, or maybe you want to connect with them because of a firm that they work for or past experience, something like that. You're welcome after a couple minutes to kind of pop out. Lauren and I will be in this main room and then we can send you to that breakout room with that alumni that you'd like to connect with. So I'm going to open these rooms and let you all jump in. And then, like I said, if you have questions, just pop out. We'll be in the main room. Here we go. Andrea, are you there? Or Andrea, I'm sorry. I'm not.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm gonna change device, so I'm probably gonna request to join again the meeting.
Okay. Let's see. Do you have someone you'd like to join too?
Yes, but I don't recall the name, but it was the person that the guy that just spoke. He was talking about him being in small
Okay.
firms.
Oh, okay. We'll send you to Matt.
Okay, Matt, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I think I've got everyone now. There we go. All right. I'm going to pause this.